Okay, we are live. Hi, this is William Ramsey. Welcome to William Ramsey Investigates. On today's show, I have a very special guest. She comes to us all the way from South Africa. Her name is Sarah McCarthy. Last name is spelled McCarthy. And she has a book that's going to be published, hopefully, in January. It was intended to be published, I think, today or sometime in December. There's been a few delays. The full title of the book, and if you're watching this on YouTube, X, Rumble, Rockfin, you'll see the cover. Full title is Blue Butterfly Inside the Diary of an Epstein Survivor, and it has a foreword by Nick Bryant. He's been on my show. He's talked about the whole Epstein situation in great detail. The timing of this interview is extraordinary in the sense that we've just had these two huge releases of information. Today is the 29th of December. The releases were December 19th and the 23rd. I think over 30,000 pages. People have gone through it. Lots of pictures, too. And some of the pictures tie into some of the top subject matter of her book. Like I said, it's not published yet. I have some information on it. I've done so much research on Epstein. I'm pretty knowledgeable. I'm not at Ryan Dawson levels of knowledge, but I know a lot about the case and how big it is and how vast it is and all this stuff that was taking place fairly recently, like not back in the late 90s, but actually up until his suspicious death in 2019. But she can talk more about that. So, Sarah McCarthy, welcome to the show.
Hi there, William. Thank you so much for hosting me.
For people who haven't heard your name, haven't maybe seen this book that's coming out, maybe you can talk about your background, your career, and then what led you into the research involved in publishing this book, Blue Butterfly.
Well, my career was actually in writing. I'm a copywriter by trade. So that's been my career my entire life. Started off in South Africa and then did 17 years copywriting in London. And I worked for some top agencies, including Ogilvy and Mather. I've also worked for HSBC, Harrods, Burberry, companies like that. So I do have a writing background, although it is quite difficult to switch from being a copywriter to being an author. It's a very different mindset and a very different way of writing. The reason why I decided to write this book is because I am a good friend of Juliet Bryant. And she's quite a well-known Epstein survivor. She has been speaking out a lot about her experience, and she has a large following specifically on X. She's also done quite a few interviews, and she's appeared in the BBC documentary, The House of Maxwell.
Right. So how did you find out? How did you contact her, or how did this contact take place? She's from South Africa too, right?
She's from South Africa. We've been good friends for over 15 years. But the interesting thing about Juliet is, like a lot of the survivors, she actually endured her abuse in silence for many years. She didn't tell even her own mother what happened to her. So she was trafficked by Epstein between 2002 and 2004. But it was only after his arrest in 2019, and when the press got hold of the story, her name was actually on the flight logs. So she therefore got contacted by the press. So while she had actually not wanted to speak out, she had only ever confided in one person, and that was her boyfriend, her fiance at the time. And unfortunately, she wasn't able to keep it a secret any longer. And the press started contacting her. Her name became public, and that's when she actually had to tell her mum what had happened to her in 2019. And she also shared with me what had happened. And that's when the first that I learned that she had been a victim of Jeffrey Epstein.
And she was involved in, I think you said 2002 to 2004. And we have pictures that came out just recently in the picture release of Clinton and these two guys, Spacey and Tucker, on the plane in Africa, right? So we know that it kind of coincides with her involved into the inner core of the Epstein trafficking network. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Because of the flight logs, we have the exact date when Juliet was recruited. which was actually the 26th of September 2002. So Clinton was doing a tour of Africa to combat HIV and to promote economic development on the continent in Africa. And for some reason, he was ferried around on this humanitarian tour by Epstein on his Boeing 727. And there was a large entourage, including Kevin Spacey and Chris Tucker, that joined them. There were some other people, quite famous names on board, as well as some females, one of them being Ghislaine Maxwell, and some of the co-conspirators also joined him, and possibly a couple of victims. So we know that that was the date because we could see that he touched down in Cape Town on that particular day. And on that fateful evening, Juliet happened to be out. She was modeling part-time. She was studying psychology at the University of Cape Town and modeling part-time with an agency called Colt. And Colt had put together a table of their models, and they were out that evening, and she was approached by a very attractive African-American model who came up to her and said, "Would you like to meet the King of America?" She was there with him, and she told him that he was a very powerful benefactor who could make her career internationally because he had contacts with Victoria's Secret. She also obviously name-dropped that he was there with Clinton at the time and possibly name-dropped the celebrities, etc. So to Juliet, a young aspiring model, this sounded like a wonderful opportunity. And she grasped it. She said, yes, of course, I'd love to meet her. She was there with another friend of hers who was also a model. And they went that very evening, jumped into Juliet's car and drove from the bar where they were down to a restaurant called Beluga. And that is where Epstein was dining with this high-profile entourage. So when they walked in, they were all busy eating, but yet they all stood up and met with Juliet and the other model that she was with, including this girl who had recruited them. And they all stood up mid-meal and shook their hands. And Juliet described a situation where she met Clinton, and he held onto her hand for a long time while he was having a conversation with another person at the table. And she said that this made her feel quite uncomfortable, this extended handshake. And that was her first time that she met Epstein.
And then what happened with that? So she was kind of brought in, and then they started. I mean, Epstein was bouncing around internationally on his plane. So what happened next to her?
Well, Epstein obviously took a liking to her. She's exactly his type. She's tall, petite, blue-eyed, long chestnut hair, very beautiful. And she had just turned 20 at the time. So he told this young model who had recruited her at this bar that he was very interested in her, and he thought she had potential. So when she went home, I think she received a message or a phone call from this very attractive African-American model who recruited her. And she said, "Oh, he really liked you. He would like to see your modeling portfolio. Could you attend a casting at the Cape Grace Hotel the next day?" So Juliet said, absolutely. And she thought, all her dreams were coming true. So the next morning she received another phone call, and she said, "When you come along and bring your portfolio, your modeling portfolio, would you like to come a little bit earlier and attend a speech that Clinton was giving?" So she went earlier. They were all busy boarding 2 minivans when she arrived at the Cape Grace Hotel, which is a 5-star hotel in the Victoria and Albert waterfront. And she went in one minivan. The celebrities were all in another minivan. And they went off to a low-level university, Cape Peninsula Technikon University, where Clinton gave the speech. And she said it was pretty standard and cookie cutter. She wasn't particularly interested in it. She was more actually interested in the celebrities and looking at them. So I don't know, why they invited her to go along to the speech, maybe to impress her a little bit. But when they got back to the Cape Grace Hotel, she was then told, please, she would like to attend this casting and to get her modeling portfolio. So she got her portfolio, went up to the presidential suite, which she believes Epstein was sharing with Clinton, because while she was attending this casting in the living area, not a real casting, in hindsight, it was a manufactured fake casting, that Epstein put 3 of his girls on a table and made them pose as Karen model agents to recruit her, basically. And while they were looking at her photos and paging through her book and looking at it and making comments on her photos, Clinton walked through and the living area and said hi to them all and walked through and one interleading door into another. After the casting, the lady said, "Oh, we really think that you got huge potential for Victoria's Secret." They showed her through to an interleading room where Epstein was sitting. He then started profiling Juliet. So in hindsight, he asked her a number of questions which were very leading, asking her, did she have any sisters? What was her family situation like? Was she close to her father? And what was her financial situation like? And this is his typical, questions profiling the young women that he trafficked to find out if they would be suitable. So he deliberately preyed on those who were perhaps from broken homes or had, were more vulnerable in society for a number of reasons, whether it was financial or through their family ties. And he obviously decided that Juliet would be, although she comes from a very good family, she went to a private all-girls school. Her parents were getting divorced at the time, and money was an issue. I think on another level, South Africans are possibly easier to recruit than Americans, because he could extricate her from her lifelines. He organized her model visa in a short space of time. He paid for her flights to New York, and he got her there within like 3 weeks of first meeting her. And once she was there, she was now removed from her lifelines, her family, her friends. Her mobile phone wasn't working, her cell phone was not working in the States because it's a different system. So he's very clever in that way, how he orchestrated it, that she was now, removed from her family. And he then had complete control over her as soon as she landed in New York.
And so did she go to his mansion? Is that where she stayed, or with his brother? I know his brother had kind of like a suite with beds or something for the models. Was she part of that kind of clique?
Yes. Well, she did go to his mansion, but on a separate trip. So he's very clever. He had the driver, who I think his name was Jojo, pick her up at the airport in a fancy town called car. She had a name on her board, so she thought, wow, I've obviously made it in life. She thought this was amazing. She was, remembers the drive into Manhattan, seeing these big billboards and thinking one day I could be on one of those. And she was taken to the model apartment, which is 301 East 66th Street. And that is, according to property records, was owned by Ossa Properties, belonging to Epstein's brother, Mark. So you're correct in saying that. He housed a lot of the girls that he trafficked, as well as the girls who worked for him as assistants. There were a lot of model, small apartments there. Some of his associates were also housed there when they visited. I think Ehud Barak was spotted in the entrance foyer by other people who lived in the block. So this block was central to his trafficking operations. And she was she was given a key and she was given her own apartment. She was not there for very long. She said only about sort of 15, 20 minutes. And then the landline began to ring. So she answered the landline. It was Sarah Kellen, who said, pack a bag, we are going to the Caribbean. You've got this many, minutes to shower and pack a bag. So she was in a bit of a fluster. She's just flown all the way from Cape Town. It's a long international flight. She hadn't slept because she was so excited. It was the first time she'd ever flown internationally. So she was obviously very nervous and excited and probably exhausted at this stage. She also hadn't planned to leave New York. No one knew where she was going. And she had to sort of upend her bag and pack a smaller bag, with a cabin trunk to go to the Caribbean. And when she got outside, the same driver was there waiting for her. Possibly in hindsight, he had never left. He then drove her to Teterboro Airport, which is where Epstein's jets, flitted in and out of New York. And she obviously thought that she was being taken to the Caribbean because she was possibly doing a shoot for Victoria's Secret, or at least getting some bikini, photos for her modeling portfolio. And Epstein's Gulfstream was waiting on the runway. And when she got onto the private jet, she noticed the two of the Karen models that had recruited her, one being Sarah Kellen, was there, and another lady. So she thought, oh, amazing, we are doing a Victoria's Secret shoot. But Epstein was there, and he patted the seat next to him, and she went to go and sit next to him. And soon after they took off, the abuse began. He put his hands firmly between her legs and started abusing her immediately, which was, she was absolutely shocked. She didn't know what was going on. And her thought process at the time is that if I don't play along, these people are going to kill me, which is quite an extreme reaction to have. But in hindsight, she said nobody knew where she was going. And her mum didn't know. If she had gone missing, they would have looked for her in New York. Nobody would have known that she was flying to this private island in the Caribbean. So it was very worrying. And in hindsight as well, her name was left off that flight log for that flight.
Right, that's a very important point. So just because there's a flight log with people on there doesn't mean that it encompasses all the people on that plane. That it may have some of the correct names, but not all the passengers. So,
well, his flight logs were notoriously incomplete, and if you look at them, sometimes they're spelling mistakes in the people's names. I actually know a few. I've got 3 friends whose names are all on the flight logs. They don't spell all the names correctly, and in addition to that, if you do look at them, sometimes they have female to, etc. They don't always have the correct names. And listening to Virginia Giuffre, she said that Nadia Marcinkova was on that trip to South Africa in her memoir, but her name's not on the flight logs. And at that time, she was very young, so possibly they just didn't put the young girls' names on the flight logs.
Why would they? They're trying to cover up evidence of trafficking and stuff like that. And rip Virginia Giuffre, who put out a book this year, and then a lot of people around this whole thing died suspiciously. Epstein, I think that's Jean-Luc Brunel, died in jail. Her, other mysterious. There was people in that apartment. I don't remember the girl's name, but the apartment where Juliet stayed in, there was another girl who died out of that, and suspiciously, like 20 years ago. Like some of these. Pardon?
She died in the apartment, or she had stayed in the apartment?
She had stayed in there, and I think she was either thrown out of or fell out of a window or died suspiciously or something about it. I have to go back and look at my files, but there was somebody associated with that thing. When you say Karen models, is that a modeling agency? What is that term? I don't know what that is.
Yes, Karen is Karin. Jean-Luc Brunel, who you just mentioned now.
That's him on the screen right there. That's him.
Screen with the flamboyant pants on. His moniker was Epstein's pimp, basically because he supplied girls. He would recruit a lot of them in France or in Europe and fly them over to Epstein, who would then house them in this model apartment. Epstein boasted about sleeping with over 1,000 of Brunel's girls. So they set up a model agency together. So Jean-Luc Brunel actually faced allegations in Paris. So he had to then flee to the States. There he set up Karen Models of America in 1995. But in about 2004, Epstein gave him $1 million, advanced a line of credit so that he could set up MC Squared. And that was the model agency that Epstein funded, according to somebody who worked for MC Squared. It's Einstein's theory of relativity, and E is the missing number, so that would stand for Epstein.
E equals MC squared, right? So that makes perfect sense. That's kind of when did she start? I mean, so she was abused almost right away and brought into this kind of group on the trip to the island. When did she start realizing how strange they were and their involvement in eugenics and transhumanism? Was it something that struck her right away, or was it after being trafficked for months?
Well, let's start in the beginning. That's quite a broad question. So the very first time he abused her, I think he had a strategy. He was quite clever. He would get girls in a state where they were mentally fatigued and, removed from their lifelines, as Juliet was on that flight. And that makes people a lot more susceptible to go
suggestion.
along with.
Yeah. He understood behavioral psychology is what you're saying, right?
Well, absolutely. So he was very much into behavioral psychology. He funded scientists that were cognitive scientists, psychologists, psychiatrists, neuroscientists, and that was his main focus or fascination. He was fascinated with how the brain functioned. And Juliet told me on several occasions he'd often used to quiz her and ask her little riddles and tell her, oh, your brain works differently to other people. So he was fascinated with brain function. And actually, if you look at the tranche of documents that have been released, you can type in, I think, a Courier Newsroom put them all into a searchable format. And if you type in brain or cognition or brain function or behavior, there are so many hits that come up. And that has just corroborated everything that I've written about in Blue Butterfly. I have an entire chapter that is all about mind control. And Juliet firmly believes that that is why a lot of the girls were going back. The young women that he trafficked were going back because he was manipulating them psychologically into doing so. And this is something that other people haven't been talking about. And it's a very important piece of the puzzle. I have another whole chapter which talks about how Epstein used food as a tool of manipulation and control. He gave them, the young women that he trafficked, he gave them starvation rations. He also had all their meals were plated. In the evenings, he never had a plate of food put in front of him. So Juliet believes that he was possibly afraid that he could have been poisoned. And he would often, there's no mind control in there, but there's lots of minds. I can see you typing in that. So if you type in
stuff, yeah.
brain.
What should I look for? Brain?
Brain. If you type in brain. So Epstein actually sat on the board of Harvard's Mind, Brain, and Behavior Committee. It's an interfaculty committee. And that would have given him a front row seat into how to manipulate the brain. When you look at Murray's experiments that he did that involved Theodore Kaczynski, who's the Unabomber, he was subjected to some of these mind control experiments in Harvard that were then later described as, basically they were terrorizing these young students and they were abusive. So I don't know if Epstein wasn't involved in some type of mind control with Harvard or just got a front row seat to how to manipulate the brain. So you'll see a lot of documents there around brain and behavior and cognition. There are some emails that have been uncovered as well about these interfaculty disciplines, which look at the pleasure centers, not the pleasure centers, it's actually the pleasure signatures in the brain. And Epstein actually told Juliet that when a woman looks at a plate of food, the same part of her brain lights up as when a man looks at an attractive woman. And I believe that they were looking specifically at how to manipulate these young women through pleasure and possibly pain and trauma. Juliet, to get back to how she suddenly realized that something else was going on, she had 4 trips in total with Epstein. And what a lot of people don't understand is that the girls were free to go, but they were returning. And this ties back into the fact that he was manipulating them. He controlled them with promises and threats. He was always dangling a carrot like a Victoria's Secret modeling contract. A lot of these were empty promises that never came to fruition. In addition to that, he would then threaten them. So after her first trip with Epstein, he said to her, "Oh, I would like to see you." And it was the first time that she was called into his office. So she knew that there was something different going on here. And he had 2 offices in Palm Beach. Juliet remembers this one being sort of stark and white and unwelcoming. And she went into the office, and there he was very serious with her. It wasn't like the other encounters in the bedroom or in the massage room. He said to her, I work for the CIA, and I have your family on a list. So she didn't know what he was talking about originally because she was from South Africa. She believed that the CIA were an agency that basically helped people, in the States. And she didn't really understand that it does have a shadow side. And when he said to her, "I have your family on a list," she sort of didn't know exactly what he was talking about. But in hindsight, she realizes that it was a very serious threat, that if she had gone to the authorities or done anything like that, spoken out, her family would have been in immediate danger. Because in that meeting in his office, he then went into another reason why she should obey him. He said there was a young woman once who went to the authorities to accuse him of rape. And he said, obviously, I didn't do anything. But the police were called. They raided her apartment and they found drugs in her apartment. And she was then put in jail. So in hindsight, this was another threat. It was, if you go to the authorities, I have power and I can possibly have you put in jail. For all we know, Epstein planted those drugs in this poor girl's apartment and had her put in jail. So Juliet knew never to cross him or never to go to the authorities. So that's also why she endured her abuse in silence for so many years.
Right. So he was good. He's an experienced guy. This is like abuser protocol 101. Did she really think that he had intelligence ties when she was done? She was with him for 2 years. Did she think that was real or just a fake threat? Do you know?
I think, I go into intelligence, obviously, in my book, and I have a whole chapter called Intelligence. That was the interesting photo that I looked at, because the interesting thing about that photo with that tattoo on his arm, I didn't realize that he had a tattoo, which is quite an unattractive one, if you ask me, because he specifically did not like any women or any of the young women that he recruited to have tattoos. They were not allowed to wear revealing clothing. They had to wear, a shirt that would be buttoned up to the top. They weren't allowed to wear loud earrings, only sort of small, studs in their ears, etc. So he was quite controlling over them in that way. And then I thought it was quite unusual because I didn't know that he had a tattoo himself. So while he expected the young woman that he trafficked not to do any of the things that he didn't want them to do, and that also included drinking alcohol. Epstein was a teetotaler himself. He was very controlling about how they were perceived in public, which is interesting. Sorry, what was the original question?
Well, this picture is interesting too. It's just like there's some kind of kid there too. Like, well, I don't know where this is, but there's clearly somebody who's like 10 or 8 or I don't even know. I think I was asking about whether she really thought he was in the CIA or Intel connected.
Oh yes, the intelligence side of things. I was fortunate enough to speak with Ari Ben Menashe, and he gave me a lot of information. He was a former Israeli military intelligence officer. And in that capacity, he worked for Amman, not Mossad. And he worked directly with Ghislaine Maxwell's father, Robert Maxwell. And he was the conduit through which they were sending money to Israel was selling arms to Iraq during the Iran-Iraq conflict. And Maxwell was the conduit through which they were shifting the funds. He was the whale. And Maxwell obviously knew Epstein back in those days in the 1980s. Ari Ben Menashe said he saw Epstein would travel through his London offices, which is the Mirror Group, on his way to and from Israel. So Epstein actually knew Ghislaine Maxwell back in the 1980s. The press makes it sound like they met after Robert Maxwell's death. So he died he was found dead once he had fallen overboard of his super yacht, which was named the Lady Ghislaine.
Supposedly, right? Supposedly fell over, right? Allegedly.
Ghislaine Maxwell apparently told a couple of the survivors that he was killed by Mossad because he was working for Mossad at the time. He had got into some financial difficulty. The Mirror Group's pension fund was missing, pension pot was missing. And I think he threatened them and said, basically, you have to fund my lifestyle, etc. There's also a lot of people who think that Epstein could have actually siphoned off those funds from the Mirror Group pension pot. He had skills, obviously, in shadow banking. At the time, he was working as a sort of financial bounty hunter and shifting funds on behalf of wealthy individuals. So either going after people to retrieve funds or hiding funds for them. And that was sort of his game at the time in the 1980s. And then he got involved in, obviously, the arms weapons trading as well. He was connected to several people in that area, Adnan Khashoggi and also Sir Douglas Leese. And if you listen to Steve Hoffenberg, the late Steve Hoffenberg from Towers Financial, is where Epstein also worked after he had been fired or left Bear Stearns under unusual circumstances. He said he met him through Sir Douglas Leese. Hoffenberg met Epstein through Sir Douglas Leese, and he was an arms trader. So
I'm not familiar with that name. I've never heard that one. I know Hoffenberger. I've heard of that. So.
Yes, yeah. Hoffenberg. So Stephen Hoffenberg said that Epstein was the one who actually masterminded the Ponzi scheme that landed Hoffenberg in jail for 18 years. So to circle back to the intelligence connections, it's likely that Epstein had connections with both the CIA and Israeli intelligence, whether it was Amman or Mossad, I'm not sure, because he never seemed to, he was like the Teflon Don, he never went down for any of the crimes. So Hoffenberg landed in jail for 18 years, but Epstein was never charged for that Ponzi scheme, which is interesting. And he got away with his crimes for way longer than he should have. That looks like
it's incredible that he had that long of a run. Like from the 90s to 2019, he was arrested, I think, at Teterboro, too. So that airport. He also had strange things like you write about and focus on your book, his ideas about reading and strange things that happened. Juliet made it to Zorro Ranch in New Mexico. Is that correct?
She did on her fourth and final trip. So she did 3 trips with him in reasonably close succession. And then there was quite a long break. And for some reason, then he just called her up and said, oh, I'm flying you back to New York. And this would have been in June 2004. So when he flew her to New York, she then was taken to Zorro Ranch. And that's where this story comes into its own and why it's so different to any other survivor story. When Juliet was there, a number of things happened. Firstly, Epstein didn't abuse her. And for a man of his prolific sexual appetite that was quite unusual. Secondly, he took her into a small room and he made her lie on like a doctor's table and gave her what she said felt like a pelvic exam. He felt her in an almost medical way. And further to that, when she got back to South Africa, she suddenly had a terrifying flashback and a memory that she could describe to me in vivid detail of her waking up naked in a laboratory type setting. There was a female doctor that was operating on her without her knowledge and without her consent. And this memory she could describe. She could describe the medical equipment that was around her. She said it was unlike anything you would see in a normal doctor's operating theater. A lot of the equipment seemed to be above her, and there was a rectangular sheet, sort of the size of a door, above her with medical equipment. And when she gained consciousness, the doctor who was operating on her noticed that she was awake or conscious and came to her and sort of placated her and said, "Calm down, you're fine, everything's okay." And after that, she moved back to Juliet's abdomen and started pushing or doing something down there. And Juliet said she could feel the pressure of her touch, but no pain. So she assumes she had been given anesthesia. And that terrifying sort of flashback is what has haunted her for so many years, because she was unsure of what was happening, what was going on. And she has very strong intuition. And she told me while I was researching and writing this book that she believes that he harvested her ova at that time. And it's funny, since I've actually done a few pre-interviews, I actually have been contacted by another survivor who told me her story as well. And she has corroborated Juliet's belief that she thinks her ova were being harvested by saying that Ghislaine Maxwell used to call her on a regular basis. She was living in LA, so she only met Epstein once. But Ghislaine Maxwell called her and offered her increasingly larger amounts of money in exchange for her ova. And she decided not to go ahead. But the amount became so high that it actually reached $1 million.
Wow.
And yes.
What do you think? Why do you think they wanted that? Or why did she think it?
Well, through my research, I can see a lot of the survivors have a particular blood type and a particular convergence of bloodlines. And that's what this particular survivor believes, that she was targeted for her bloodline. Whereas the other survivors that I've spoken with have mainly negative blood types, and I believe they are specifically targeted for this reason. They want eggs with the negative factor, rhesus factor.
Wow, for what reason? I mean, what are they putting them in some other woman to have a baby or something like that?
Well, I think if they were to put them in some other woman, that would be specifically for SCNT, which is somatic cell nuclear transfer, although I believe that they have far more sophisticated technology than the normal cloning process. So when Dolly the sheep was cloned in 1996, they take an egg from one sheep and a cell from the actual animal that they want to clone. And they take that nucleus out and they get the donor egg. They enucleate that egg, which means they take the nucleus out. They take the nucleus from whichever person, animal, etc., that they want to clone, and they put that nucleus into that egg. And then in order to gestate that fetus, it needs to go into a surrogate. That is how Dolly the sheep was cloned. Obviously, this process took, I think it was 219 trials before there was a successful sheep that was born. I believe it could be cloning. I'm not sure. Epstein was into genetic editing, gene editing. He was into, he was funding one particular eugenicist and geneticist who was into creating superior humans, or sought to identify genes that could be manipulated or engineered into creating superior humans. But when you look at what he was doing in context of his interest in eugenics, it paints a rather disturbing picture.
Do you
The
know?
New York.
Sorry to interrupt, but do you know the geneticist's name that he was working with?
Yes, that particular geneticist is George M. Church, who has quite a few startups. And he was the one who the New York Times said sought to identify genes that could be engineered in order to create superior humans. He also has a dating app based on sort of DNA dating app that Gizmodo described as a dating app that only a eugenicist would love. However, he claims he's not a eugenicist, that he's into genetics. Epstein was also into CRISPR, Cas9, that sort of gene editing, which is sort of, maybe creating a designer child. It has a lot of controversy around that because people can perhaps, genetically modify their own children and choose which genes that they want to have. But yeah, Epstein's interest in eugenics was very disturbing and very well documented. The New York Times wrote about it. And specifically, he spoke to 3 separate sources interviewed by the Times and told them that he wanted to seed the human race with his DNA. And specifically, he wanted to impregnate up to 20 women at a time at Zorro Ranch. So, yeah. And then The Guardian also said he was inspired by Robert K. Graham, who was a businessman who sought to strengthen the human gene pool with his repository for germinal choice. So he was an avid eugenicist himself, and he complained about retrograde humans. And in 1980, he announced his plans to start his repository. And in his case, he was going to stock his sperm bank with the sperm of Nobel Prize winners and other outstanding men. So according to Slate, he only managed to convince a handful of them to donate their sperm. But it's interesting that he ran his repository for germinal choice from his ranch in California, and specifically in an underground bunker in the backyard of his ranch in California. And the parallels with Epstein's ranch in New Mexico are also unsettling. And the fact that he could also have underground facilities. And what is quite interesting is that I think the repository, so Robert K. Graham's repository for germinal choice, closed down in 1999, I think it was. And round about 2000, Epstein started telling his associates how he wanted to seed the human race with his DNA. So, according to some reports, Robert K. Graham's repository, the sperm was incinerated, but who's to say it wasn't just moved across to Zorro Ranch and Epstein succeeded where he failed and actually managed to convince a number of other Nobel laureates to donate their sperm.
And we know that they were part of this network, like guys who worked at MIT and all these other people. It's not arguable. Bart asks, she may be describing IVF procedures for sure. Did she see an ultrasound scanner in that room? Are you aware of that? Just
I don't think she's just no. IVF is for a woman that is unable to ovulate naturally. They're given specific drugs. Seraphine, I think, is one. Clomid, I can't remember the names off the top of my head. But that is given to women who are unable to ovulate naturally, and therefore they can then ovulate. I think this was a very different procedure. Epstein specifically liked to traffic young women around prime egg-bearing age. So women around 17 to 19 produced the healthiest eggs, and those were the women that he was trafficking. He also told Virginia Giuffre he sort of defended his abuse of any woman that was old enough to menstruate. But who's to say that that isn't because they're menstruating, they're now also ovulating? So when you look at all of these little tidbits, little clues that he's given us, it could be very likely that he was trafficking women specifically to harvest their eggs. Virginia Giuffre also had an awful experience where she woke up, she said, in a pool of blood. Not at Zorro Ranch, though, this was in the New York mansion. And Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell rushed her to New York Presbyterian Hospital. There she was sedated. She remembers Epstein speaking directly with the doctor. She wasn't really told what was going on. Afterwards, she spent 2 days in hospital. Afterwards, Epstein said to her that she had had a miscarriage. But when she looked at their medical records, they made no mention of a miscarriage. In fact, they just said she was stressed and she had lost 7 pounds. Afterwards, she had a small incision, she said, near her belly button. Juliet also had an incision after New Mexico, which was, she described it as 2 inches above her pubic bone. One of the other girls in the house in New York said to Virginia Giuffre that incision is consistent with a laparoscopic surgery and an ectopic pregnancy. But a laparoscopic surgery normally has 3 incisions on the abdomen. This was only 1. And why did both Juliet and Virginia Giuffre speak of 1 incision? And are they the same? What were they doing?
Giuffre, in her biography, the one that was published in the Maxwell papers from the case in 2019, said that both Epstein and Ghislaine took her to like a secluded part of that island and asked her to bear a child. So they wanted to have a child, and they give her money and no questions asked. Just you bear the child. For what reason, God only knows, but it's a creepy aspect to this kind of breeding thing. And you see it actually for people who don't believe it. Yao of God in Brazil was doing this kind of stuff. He was doing breeding programs and giving kids to elite families or adoption or for whatever reason. So there may have been some other aspect of this trafficking. Maybe those eggs were for women who couldn't, ovulate or something. Who knows? Like maybe he was trading and traffic. He trafficked in everything else. So why wouldn't he traffic on these, girls that he thought were genetically superior or whatever his ideas were? I mean, it's a creepy aspect. Yeah.
It's a very creepy aspect. And to go back to the proposal to Virginia Giuffre, she was freaked out by it because they said, well, this would be your baby, but it would really be our baby, and we can do whatever we want with our child.
Right.
And that was the catalyst for her to now escape to Thailand. So she said, yes, like Juliet often did. She just went along with things on the surface, and then decided she wasn't going to do it because you couldn't say no to these people. So Virginia Giuffre cleverly planned to escape. She said, I'll do it, but before I get pregnant, I'd like to get my massage certificate in Thailand. So Epstein said yes, he would do that. In her memoir, she goes back to the New York mansion. They are busy packing up to go on their trip, their tour of Africa, which is the same tour that they recruited Juliet. So the timelines are one after each other. So if they had wanted Virginia Giuffre to have their baby, and then they recruit Juliet pretty much in the same month, September 2002, who's to say that they're not going to just let their plans fade in the wind? These people are used to getting what they want.
Yeah, we don't know some of the other ones, Some people may have not come forward. I mean, there's been payouts of like $800 million in the whole Epstein network. So there are people who've been trafficked and who have been civilly, including Giuffre, they've won civil suits.
Correct. So Epstein actually started a trust called the Butterfly Trust. I think it was January 2014. And that trust in particular paid out amounts to women that had bogus, well, I don't know if they were bogus, but expenses next to them, such as rent or tuition, etc. And Juliet believes that the butterfly is shaped like a woman's hip bones and that those payments were specifically for eggs. And part of the reason why I want to write this book and get this information out there is I'm hoping if anybody else was solicited for their eggs, like the one survivor came to me and wanted to give me that information, I believe that there are a host of other women out there who would have similar information and who have
People
possibly.
aren't asking the right questions. You know, it goes back to the same thing. Are you asking the right questions? Because some of these women may have strange things, especially if there's like they will deliberately give you drugs so you're incapacitated, right? Or whatever. That's the whole purpose. So you don't remember this stuff, just like Giuffre waking up in a pool of blood or something like that. Like
Well, she said
these are
she was
crazy.
she was heavily sedated. And actually, I sort of cracked, I think, another code. The survivor that came forward and said that Ghislaine Maxwell offered her money for her eggs believes that she was sedated at night. She was then put in touch with another person who was linked to Epstein. He was an Epstein associate. And during her relationship with him, she believes that she was waking up late at night, and she believes that she could have been drugged at night. She couldn't remember things. And then I said to her when I interviewed her, did she ever have a dry mouth? And she said yes. And she looked at me. The CIA has documented use of using a drug called scopolamine, which is a drug that can make somebody, one, very suggestible and open to doing things, as well as it sort of basically removes, deletes your memory after that occurrence. So he could have been doing, things with these women and drugging them at night. We don't know.
They're capable of it. These monsters are definitely capable of it. Yeah, it's called Devil's Breath in Colombia. They give it
That's
to
correct.
hooker prostitutes. Sometimes give it to guys and take all their money, and they
Yes.
don't remember anything. They wake up somewhere like 2 days later, like, well, what the heck happened?
They're
Those you can actually watch those videos online. Yeah, the CIA
Yeah,
did a
they're
bunch of this.
willingly hand over like their crypto, keys, etc. So it makes people do things without, like makes them very. It's like almost a truth serum and makes them do things that they wouldn't normally do. Yeah.
Do you think that he was working? There was somebody above him, like you mentioned in your notes, like that is he the kingpin, or like I always thought Elaine was the smarter one than him, and that he was just kind of maybe carrying it, like he's like kind of the front playboy or whatever. I didn't sense that he was that clever. Like wasn't able to get out of college or things like that. I feel like, and people have said that once you started talking to him, he didn't
Mm.
sound as smart as he presented himself. Did you have
Yeah.
any thoughts on that, or somebody above him?
Yes, I absolutely believe he was just a puppet and he was working for these superiors. Yes, and they're all connected, into the intelligence community. And I believe that Ghislaine Maxwell was definitely smarter than Epstein. Juliet has said the same thing. I sort of said, what were your interactions like with her? And she said she was a very, very scary woman because she was so smart. And if anybody said anything that she didn't like, she would have annihilated them. So she was the one, remember, who had the intelligence connections. And it wasn't just Epstein who was working for intelligence. Ari Ben Menashe says that Ghislaine was also working for intelligence. She inherited her father's intelligence connections. And then also was the socialite that, was a vivacious, effortless socialite and connected Epstein to the highest.
Highly cultured, Oxford educated, the best, wealthy, super wealthy. So she was really the more polished of Epstein. Epstein's dad was like a lawnmower at a like rec facility or something. Like
He was a
literally was a groundsman. Yeah.
groundskeeper for, I think, the New York Parks Division or Parks Board. And so he
barely
grew
middle
up.
class. You can see his birthday in his birthday book, like he has friends with taxi drivers and all this stuff.
Taxi drivers,
like they're all middle class, if that. You know?
So he grew up in Brooklyn, Seagate in Coney Island. So he had a Brooklyn sort of accent. He dropped out of college twice. You're correct. and never got a degree. So I think his ascent had far more to do with his connections, possibly to intelligence, and his connections to Ghislaine Maxwell than anything, his charm or his wit or his intelligence.
He may have been town spotted his whole life by like Hank Greenberg, then to Maxwell, then to Ghislaine, and all this. Like, this guy's going to be a good front, Like,
Yes,
like play the Playboy figure and show up everywhere and fly around. I mean, obviously, he was getting money from Lex Wessner and all those guys from that group or whatever they called it, the rich Jewish billionaires or whatever.
The Mega Group.
Mega Group, yeah. Thanks.
Mega Group, yeah. Les Wexner, and then he was also connected to the Bronfmans, and I think one of Edgar Bronfman was one of the co-founders. I'm not sure off the top of my head, but he's definitely a member of the Mega Group, as is Leslie Wexner, who was, funneling assets to him in various ways. We can touch on that if you want. Epstein actually had power of attorney over his business affairs and his financial affairs.
And there's a picture of him with Lex Wexner in these pictures somewhere. They're at a tennis tournament together or something like that. Should have brought it up. Like, you see this personal connection. It's not some, amorphous thing on paper or whatever. They're clearly hanging out. And the other person is like the daughter of somebody, founder of Israel. They're all together at some tennis tournament. I don't know if I can find it, but it is remarkable, like, these kind of connections. Who else did Juliet encounter in New Mexico? I've heard of people filtering through Zorro Ranch, like Andrew was there, and also trafficking from South America into Zorro Ranch, like Mexican trafficking or Latino kids. Have you heard anything about that, like that?
When she was there, she met Nadia Marcinkova for the first time, who is a co-conspirator, although she was only 17 at the time. And Juliet said she was a very sweet, kind girl. I think it's quite unfair to label her a co-conspirator, although she apparently did engage in sexual acts with other survivors in the bedroom. She was apparently purchased by Epstein when she was just 14 years old from her parents in Yugoslavia. And
this validates this. Sorry to interrupt, but like, this is from the recent drops. This is Epstein. It's blanked out. I don't think, according to the laws that allowed this stuff to be released, it's not supposed to be blanked out, but this is clearly like a 10 or 12-year-old kid. So, like, the people who said that Epstein was only, like, the legend is he was only, with a 15-year-old from what happened in 2007. No, guys. There's a lot of younger kids floating around here, like Marcinkova when she was younger too. Sorry.
Yes, well, she was recruited when she was 14. Epstein was also godfather to 3 children belonging to one of his ex-girlfriends, and they routinely flew on his private jet, so it could have been one of his godchildren at the time. I mentioned that photo that photo got a lot of attention, the mustard dentist chair with the masks all around, because that was on his private island. Epstein seemed to have a fixation for dentist chairs. When his Palm Beach villa was raided in 2005, they found a dentist chair complete with all the parts in his ensuite bathroom, which is quite a strange thing to have in your ensuite bathroom. And then his girlfriend at the time of when he was arrested, Karina Shuliak, was a dentist. He encouraged her to get her dental degree and funded it, and then helped her set up a company which was based in the US Virgin Islands, along with Epstein's sort of shell companies and other companies that were based there. But that was apparently her office. And why he has all those strange masks on the wall, the whole thing is just very creepy. And people have tried to identify the masks. I think the 2 that you can see above the door are supposedly Laurel and Hardy. And then several other people have tried to identify the other masks. I'm not sure if any of them hit the mark. They caricature style, so it's difficult to say for sure who they are.
Right. No, it's really something else. Like, how much of the resources and things like that he had at his disposal was like wild. But so at Zorro Ranch, like, was anybody else there? Like, did she? Is there like? Does she like? My understanding is the mansion was like people were coming and going to that mansion all the time, and the island. Was Zorro Ranch like that too? And did they have any famous people that she witnessed there?
Yes, I decided to take his name out of the book. There was a influential Hollywood figure. He was involved in the movie called The Island, which is about two clones escaping into the Arizona or Nevada desert out of an underground facility.
Wow.
I don't know if you've seen the movie. It's got Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson in it, and basically they don't realize it, but they're clones in an underground facility, and they are bred basically to be harvested for organs, etc., for wealthy individuals. And this was in 2004 that she met this famous Hollywood figure, and in 2005 this movie was released, which basically mirrored the landscape mirrored Zorro Ranch. So where the yes,
I'll
and
have to
then you look
watch
at
it again now.
yeah. So then you look at the fact that he was potentially harvesting eggs. You look at the fact that the raw footage from outside his prison cell has been manipulated. It was cut shortly before midnight on the 9th of August, 2019. He was found unresponsive in his cell that next morning on the 10th of August. And about 3 minutes, just under 3 minutes, was cut from that footage. So who's to say that somebody didn't access his prison cell and maybe switch out the Epstein for the clone, or kill the clone if the clone was the one that was already arrested. But a lot of people seem to think, and specifically the survivors that I've interviewed, seem to think that Epstein was too powerful and that he is still alive, that he was never killed.
Some people have that idea that he's got himself switched out. His two attorneys said that he had no intent on committing suicide, and they've said that there's other things, strange things in these new documents about Tartaglione, and also drugging too, that Epstein didn't remember the first so-called suicide attempt, which may not have been a suicide attempt. I can't remember the date, but that he may
Yes.
have been drugged, and that's why he couldn't remember it, which would be consistent with these guys' behavior, drugging all the time. It's just off the charts.
Well, he should have, because of that suicide attempt. I think he just woke up and he wasn't sure what had happened. He should have still been on suicide watch, which is another one in a long list of things that just seem to make absolutely no sense. So in my book, I go into another inconsistency. According to the official time scale, time frames, he was found unresponsive in his cell at 6:30 in the morning, but he was pronounced dead at 6:39 in New York Presbyterian Hospital. So the guards would have had to have found him, tried to do some sort of resuscitation on him, got him onto a trolley, wheeled him out of a high security facility, got him into an ambulance, driven a short distance through downtown Manhattan, wheeled him into the emergency ward, where they would have performed more medical, resuscitation attempts on him. And then he was pronounced dead all within 9 minutes. The time frame doesn't make any sense.
Why do you think that there's that kind of error in the time frame?
I don't know. Why are all these errors so glaring and obvious? And why can none of them be explained? Why were the two guards sleeping? Why are they the only two that have actually why were there only two that were actually arrested? Well, the rest of, if Ghislaine Maxwell was put in prison for sentenced for 20 years for sex trafficking, where are all the other Johns?
Right.
Where are the files? Why is nobody being questioned or arrested?
One of these new releases says there were 10 co-conspirators in 2019. So something happened. Like they were at some point they were investigating. We don't know because of the redactions, but we know that there were other people being investigated that have never been charged. And there has to be more conspirators. And the FBI is like, I mean, and it's not even my opinion. Kash Patel like perjured himself in front of Congress. Like he literally said, "There's, I have no evidence of anything," and then the evidence drops out. So it's like, wow, you're either not paying attention or lying. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
But Wendy asked, any idea what really may have happened to Virginia? Do you have any thoughts on that?
After reading her memoir, it was actually tragic. That poor woman suffered such abuse through her entire life. I don't know if you've read her memoir, but she was abused by apparently, allegedly, should I say, her father, and allegedly the father's friend. And then she was also trafficked by another sex trafficker called Ron Eppinger. So before Epstein had even recruited her, well, Ghislaine Maxwell actually recruited her from Mar-a-Lago, where she was working in the spa, Donald Trump's exclusive members only club in Palm Beach. She had already been trafficked and been sent
She was
away
abused her whole life, yeah.
her entire life. It's such a tragic story. It really is. And what Epstein did to her was much worse than anything Juliet ever had to face. So I think he was also quite intelligent in that he played a game of escalation with his survivors. On the first night or the second night that Juliet was on his private island, he flew in another woman who was slightly older and seemed a little bit more confident and tried to get Juliet involved in a threesome with her. So while they were watching a movie, which was one of his favorite pastimes, this girl then started performing a sex act on Epstein. Juliet was, coming from a conservative background, thought that sex was only something you did in private, and she got up and ran out of the room and went to her cabana where she was staying, and she was crying on the bed. Epstein actually came into the cabana and actually apologized to her because he realized that he had pushed her too far in the escalation game. So he was quite clever, and I think with Virginia Giuffre, he got into sort of BDSM type activity and pushed her a lot further. She spoke about it openly, and some of the things he did were just absolutely awful. He put her into these back breaking contortions, and
like
I don't know.
Torture, yeah.
Basically, tortured her with sort of implements like whips and other implements, and she said she just wanted to pass out from the pain. So I did hear that she had back issues, and I don't know. Nobody else has sort of said it was from this, or if it was just from her lifelong abuse, or if she suffered another accident. But there's also allegations of domestic abuse from her longtime partner. So she was apparently she needed a carer to look after her. So I don't know. Maybe it just all got too much for her. But she did speak out on social media and said she wasn't suicidal. So
right, I think there's a recording of her saying I never would commit suicide. So
she had 3 lovely children, and she writes about them so fondly, and actually of her husband Robbie. She writes very fondly of them in her memoir. So yeah, it's
a little suspicious that she was taking on very powerful people. Prince Andrew. She was in litigation with Dershowitz, which nobody ever talks about. Like you can see the records all the way up to he almost got deposed, and then something happened to that case. You can settle in strange ways. You can take the cases out of court, but she was up against these are those are just 2. Like I mean, she obviously went after sued Ghislaine.
Yes,
those are the ones that went to suit, right? So some of these other settlements, part of the settlement agreement, you don't even know what happened to them. So like,
absolutely.
There's tons of settlements taking place and tons of lawyers, very sophisticated lawyers. Boys, forgot the name of that law firm, Boys or whatever. These guys are like
Flexner. So they represented Juliet pro bono when she claimed from the Jeffrey Epstein Victims Compensation Fund. But when a lot of the survivors claimed from the fund, they had to sign something, and that actually put protection in place for a lot of the co-conspirators. It
Right,
meant
that's right.
once they received that compensation, they were then unable to raise further suits against the co-conspirators.
That's right.
Mm, very clever.
It was all very clever. Even the original case, I think, there was a global agreement, non-prosecution agreement, supposedly that they were talking about before Epstein turned up dead, that prevented him from being prosecuted again. Like, I mean, they did clever stuff back. I mean, he had the best lawyers in the world: Kenneth Starr, Dershowitz. Like, he had a real dream team.
Yeah.
These guys also did, though. You know, the original case with Ghislaine involved too the Castle filing. Have you ever read the Castle filing from the Giuffre Maxwell case? It's incredible. Castle's an incredible lawyer too. Like he's like a really like at the top tier of like boys of lawyers. Got involved in this case with Edwards, I think was his name. Like these are some of the documents are really off the charts. I read all of Giuffre's, not her most recent book, but the old book detailing the BDSM.
Yes.
With it involved another, I won't name her name, but she was in the art world.
Yes. I know who you're referring to.
Yeah, so you know all that stuff too. But it's very grim. It's very grim. But like she might have just checked out. She's probably so exhausted, Giuffre. Like, oh my God. Like shit. What a terrible life of abuse.
Absolutely awful. But she really brought to light so much because all those filings were then released from these defamation suits against Ghislaine Maxwell, etc., which were released in January 2024, and they gave me a lot of information that I needed to put together for my book. And part of that was the previous manuscript that you've just mentioned now, which was an exhibit in one of these laws, one in these filings. So it was an unpublished memoir. I think it was called the Billionaires Playboy or something other.
Yeah, Billionaires Playboy Club or alliterative. There was some kind of rhyming thing, right?
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah.
I see you focusing on the island, the temple on the
these
island.
Pictures are incredible, like this whole temple thing. But this is not the original temple because the original one had a gold dome and a lot of statuary. So
the gold, no, that is the original temple. Apparently, there was a hurricane on the island and the gold dome blew off.
Okay.
So Business Insider has reported on this temple quite extensively, and an interesting report. They said that the door, firstly, it's painted in a trompe d'oeil, so you can't really see, those stripes sort of give an illusion of depth. Secondly, that bolt is designed to keep people in rather than people out. And there's been a lot of speculation. There were two sort of avian-like sculptures on the roof, which some people have likened to the giant owl sculpture at Bohemian Grove. So there's a lot of sort of symbology around that temple. Some people say it's like the Israeli flag. Some people have likened it to the Greek flag. We all, know what the Greeks did back in the day.
Right.
The Roman Empire with their excess. So and there were so many outbuildings on the island. I can see you scrolling through all of them, and a massive sundial. But a lot of these outbuildings had ventilation shafts and infrastructure that when people have looked at them, people who know a lot more, there's the giant sundial, engineers, etc., have looked at this infrastructure. They say it looks very much like ventilation shafts for underground facilities. And then you look at Epstein's own saying. He said, "On my own island and on my own ranch, I can think the thoughts that I want to think. I can do the work that I want to do, and I can explore as I see fit." There's the grand piano. What did he mean by explore? I think he meant experiment.
Right.
Yeah.
And traffic, it's a very busy, place. Like there's so many people coming and going to his island. It was supposed to be, there's like Hollywood celebrities and things and all kinds of stuff going on. So
Well, what Juliet said, she made quite an interesting point. She said the island didn't have very luxurious accommodation. She said if somebody had wanted to go and have a wonderful, luxurious, one of these celebrities have a luxurious holiday, they would have gone somewhere like Richard Branson's Necker Island. They wouldn't have gone to Little St. James. She said that the accommodation was not up to celebrity standard. So why were they going there?
Right, good point. Right.
Turn the slides on.
Very good questions. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions.
Just getting some light here.
Yeah, no problem. But this, like many of these survivors, their mental states and psychological, they're never going to get over it, are they? I mean, much like Giuffre.
Well, what was interesting is that after this trip that Juliet did to Zorro Ranch, when she got back to Cape Town, she said her mental state completely collapsed. She said she suffered from severe anxiety and severe panic attacks, to such an extent that she was hospitalized 10 times. None of the doctors knew what was wrong with her. Physically, she was fine, but they couldn't find out what was going on. They thought she could have asthma because she couldn't breathe when she was having these panic attacks. So they gave her asthma pumps. That made it worse. And she raises another interesting point. She said, yes, I was abused and all of that, but other people have had it far worse. Some people have been, chained up in a basement somewhere and abused. And she says they possibly don't have debilitating panic attacks where they cannot breathe or they cannot leave the house for a whole year. So she believes that something more was done to her than sexual abuse. And when you look at attorney Brad Edwards, you did mention his name earlier, he has now interviewed over 200 Epstein survivors while he's been representing them. He has made a similar point that Epstein was not just trafficking these girls for sexual abuse. Yes, he was abusing them, but he was only about 5% of the girls, or a small fraction of the girls, were being trafficked to other people in his associates and in his network. And only a small fraction of those people were taking him up on this offer, which was likely part of a blackmail operation. But that Brad Edwards says that was not his main business. And Juliet raises that point as well. She says something more was going on here than just sex trafficking.
There's clear blackmail things going on. A lot of these people, they got Richards in the New Mexico, George Mitchell. These are people that Giuffre, I find her to be very convincing. Like, these are the ones that Giuffre was trafficked to that are political figures. And she was young. I mean, 15, 16. I think Mitchell's passed away. I think Richardson passed away. But that's how that's how you control the state, or, have somebody look the other way at what's going on at Zorro Ranch, because the mayor, the Richardson family's big in New Mexico too. So it's not just you're blackmailing a guy who's a politician. You're blackmailing somebody who's one of the wealthiest families in New Mexico who knows how to pull the strings.
Juliet actually did meet him. Epstein took her and another survivor when she was in Zorro Ranch, took her and drove her to what she believes is the governor's mansion, which I believe is in Mansion Drive in Santa Fe. She said they drove for quite a while to get there, and she believes it was Epstein who drove on that particular occasion. So they drove all the way from the ranch to meet up with Bill Richardson, who came out of his office. He met her and the other survivor. They had like a 5 minutes meeting, looked them up and down, went back into the office with Epstein. The girls were left sitting outside the office, unsure what was going on. But she said the whole thing was very suspicious. Then Epstein came out after, a short meeting and then drove them all the way home. So she said to me, well, what were they doing there? Why did these men sort of meet them and not ask them any questions? Just basically looked them up and down, and then they left.
Wow. So, but I mean, these are little vignettes that showing this is probably going on over and over. So just one story comes out because Giuffre is courageous enough. She's living in Perth, far away, under a new name. Maybe she has enough courage to come forward because some of these other people are obviously being threatened. It definitely happened in the 2007 cases. The girls that came, almost all those girls who were victims were harassed. They had those old, I mean, it wasn't before YouTube or whatever. Like MySpace pages were in the documents. Black vehicles were following them around. Like they're really the full scale abuse. It wasn't like a light. These are very nasty people. And but one of the other things about Mitchell is that he was involved in a lot of negotiations in the Middle East. So if you blackmail that guy, he was involved in some of the Palestinian Israeli negotiations. So he's but a compromise. Like so, these are the people. Some of these people say there's no evidence of any of this stuff. This is all this is all other people's first person testimony. Maybe it has to get to court or whatever. But some of these civil suits, yeah, information's there.
Everyone's wanting the Epstein files to drop, but you can generally get a sense, I mean, through these photos, who he was hanging out with. I see you've got Leslie Wexner right there. Why has Leslie Wexner never been subpoenaed? Why is he not answering for his relationship with Epstein? Why are people not asking why he gave him power of attorney? And I think it was from 1991 all the way through to 2007. And then after that, when he retracted it, he said, oh, Epstein stole from him. But he never filed a suit. So why are these powerful people not being questioned over their relationship with Epstein? That's what
great question.
Whitney Webb says is absolutely bonkers that he's never been questioned. And it's interesting how it's always the people like the guards in the prison that get arrested, but not the people that allowed it to happen. It's always that these people are so powerful that they just can get away with everything.
Juliet, when she last saw him in 2004, was that the end of her story or what? Like, was she watching all of these unfolding events? 2007 prosecution, non-prosecution, the continue.
I think the last time she saw him was she went back to the States and she met up with a girl who was working for him as an assistant at the time for lunch, and she was in New York, and this assistant convinced her to go and see him again. And I was like, why on earth would you go and see him? And she answered, I wanted him to know that I wasn't scared of him. I wanted to know that I hadn't reported him to the authorities, because she felt since that he was constantly watching her, that he was constantly monitoring her. So she went and she met him. He was in his office at the time and was quite pleased to see her, and said she remembers one particular conversation she had. She said, I'm sorry that you had to go to jail, referring to his 2008, 2009 conviction. And he laughed and he said, I didn't have to go to jail. And she still thought that was a very interesting way that he reacted, because it was obviously he was so protected. He got his own private wing of the Palm Beach Penitentiary, and was allowed out on work release, because obviously the work that he was doing, whatever it was considered so important by the American government or the CIA or Israeli intelligence that he was allowed to continue doing it for 12 hours a day.
Right. All of the above. That's the thing. If he's in the Maxwell mold, he's working for all of them, because Robert Maxwell had MI6 connections, KGB connections, Mossad connections, maybe CIA. He was talking to people like the American elite, the American WASP elite at his time. Like, I think he was in communication with like one of the Bushes, like the Bush grandfather or something weird like that. So they're mixing in he's almost like a chip off the old block. I think Robert Maxwell, his real name was Abraham Laszlo. That was his birth name.
Yes.
But
he changed names several times, as a lot of these assets do. And he
worked for intelligence during World War II for the Brits. So he had intelligence chops.
Yeah, absolutely. And apparently Russian intelligence, as well as Israeli, as well as the Brits. Yeah,
there's an interview with him. I mean, he's crying in front of a memorial because all of his family members died in the Holocaust. And also, there's in that same documentary about him, the MI6 admitted that they financed his purchase of Pergamon Press. Like, we know he worked for us because we financed the purchase of that publishing house. You know, so all those scientific documents, which is kind of right in line with kind of Epstein. So Maxwell's phone.
Yes, the original firm was Butterworth's, and they hired him and then another intelligence asset to run it. And that was funded by MI6. And they shipped tons of scientific journals from Germany into the UK. And what's interesting is it's now tying back to this whole science philanthropy that Epstein had, and the control of scientific journals and scientific knowledge was all channeled through Maxwell originally. And then Epstein considered himself a science philanthropist and funded all these scientists, and I believe firmly shaped the direction of their research in a particular way, or then found out whatever he wanted to discover for his own nefarious activities. So they were both into science and shaping the narrative, the scientific narrative.
Right. Alexandra King asks, are any other connections to the occult or any victim statements about his occult beliefs? Do you know anything about that?
The one survivor that I have spoken with, she works with victims of SRA, satanic ritualistic abuse. She knows a lot about that. Yes, he had symbolism around his house. I do go into that in some detail in one of my chapters. That symbolism, he had framed prosthetic eyeballs in his foyer of his New York mansion. What's interesting is that nobody else has picked up on this connection. I've tied it back to another prolific pedophile on the other side of the Atlantic, who is Jimmy Savile. He stole glass eyeballs or prosthetic eyeballs from the Leeds Infirmary and made jewelry out of it, and wore sort of these necklaces and rings, etc.
He had a ring with one of the eyeballs on it, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, absolutely. So why are there these two pedophiles on either side of the Atlantic who have a fixation for glass eyeballs? It's quite strange. He also had a half man, half goat statue in his Manhattan mansion that some people say is Pan or Satyr, which is...
I say Tyr, yeah.
Yes, I'm not 100% sure actually how to pronounce it. I think it's Satyr.
I think you're right.
Yeah. So it's basically an embodiment of carnal desire and lust, basically. And what a fitting symbol for Epstein.
For sure.
That's what his whole life embodied, basically. But it's also one of his friends, or ex-friends and associate, Stuart Pavar, said he suffered from something called satyrisis, which comes from the word satires or satyr, Satyr, and that is the male form of nymphomania. And he was apparently just abusing girls all day long. So Juliet, when she was traveling with him, there were always 2 or 3 girls. He was calling them all into the bedroom 3 times a day. He was also organizing massages with girls from outside the home. So he wasn't doing any work. This idea that he was a financier is just ludicrous. He didn't have the time. He was abusing girls all day long. That was his primary business. And then perhaps trafficking them for his nefarious reasons.
It's really something else. And if I recall, Giuffre in her unpublished thing, the Billionaire Boys Club or whatever she titled it, she said that she found like dark, like black robes in one of the closets or something like that, or something like that, if I remember. So there are little things there. And she said that she saw the room where they were spying on everybody at the mansion.
Yes.
So there's all
the media.
kinds.
Juliet also saw that. There were a lot of television screens in there. There's several survivors that have reported that. Maria Farmer's a third one. Epstein showed the media room to her himself. In Juliet's case, she opened the door to have a window in a room to have a cigarette when she was at the New York mansion. And the next day, the security guard said, "Oh, I need to show you something," and showed her all the different screens. And she was shocked because it was not only the bedrooms, but also the bathrooms. And so, this man had been sitting there watching her shower, change, use the bathroom that entire time. Yeah.
Wow, amazing.
And that could be Virginia Giuffre's little dog, because I think she mentioned she had lots of pets. So I was trying to work out. Ghislaine Maxwell had a Yorkshire Terrier by the name of Max around the time that Juliet was being trafficked by Epstein and Maxwell. But that looks like it could be perhaps Virginia Giuffre had like a little Chihuahua type thing. I'm not sure what that dog is, but she said she had some small dog.
Maybe it is. The strange thing is this black and white checkerboard that people put in their kitchens. It's like the floor of a Masonic lodge. Like it gives you.
Lodge, exactly.
Yeah, so it's always whenever I see that, I always key into it when it shows up, and it's a common motif. It's actually really strange. Sarah, we are at the 90-minute mark. Great talk. Thanks for coming on the show. Good luck with the book and its publication. Is there anything you'd like to add or anything I missed before we wrap it up?
Yes, well, the book is being published by Trine Day Publishing, so it's first available in the US and Canada. It is available for pre-sale, so you can buy it either at trineday.com at their own website, or it's available on Amazon and also on Barnes & Noble. So, yeah.
It says it's going to be released on the 27th, so about a month from now. Hopefully it'll come out. Hopefully you'll be able to get that. I'll put a link to the Journalist Studio with all this database information. And also somebody did this. This is not the government's work. Somebody took all the pictures and put them up on a site called Epstein Files Browser, so you can browse through that so people can check that out. But again, the full title, let me get back to this. The full title of the book for people who are watching this. Let's see. And we had 165 live listeners. So thanks everybody for listening. Please share this document, get people out there. If you want to sign Sarah up for an interview, do that as well. But the full title of the book is Blue Butterfly, Inside the Diary of an Epstein Survivor, with a foreword by Nick Bryant. We talked about Nick Bryant I had on Epstein Justice Now. So that was kind of before these recent drops. Sarah, where's the best place for people to contact you? Do you have a website or social media?
For now, they can contact me on X. My X handle is McCarthy Truth. They can also contact me via my publisher. I've been too busy with the final manuscript to get a website up, but I will do so as soon as that is handed over, and that will be the next step. So I'll have a website up soon.
So it's McCarthy Truth on X. I'll put a link to that as well. And again, the full title is Blue Butterfly, Inside the Diary of an Epstein Survivor, and the guest is Sarah McCarthy. Thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for hosting me, William.